G'day guys, I've just finished the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin about an hour ago, and I wanted to jump on here to give you a few thoughts. Today I'm going to give you a quick recap about the story, then I'm going to go into a few things that I liked and a few things that I didn't like without spoilers, so that if you're trying to work out if you want to read this book, you can have a listen and see what you think. And then I'm going to give you warning, and I'm going to take the spoiler gloves off, and we're going to talk about some spoiler specific things that I did and didn't like as well. So let's jump into a recap. Taking place in a world called the Stillness, we follow 3 characters, Demea, Cyanite, and Essen. It's a world where a group of people called the Origins are used and abused to keep the world in one piece using their ability to manipulate Earth energy. The world has multiple apocalyptic events which are called seasons, and the Origins are supposed to stop these events from happening. They are marginalised, forced into basic slavery, bred and controlled in a systematic and brutal set of ways. This book is a mix of sci-fi and fantasy and is so full of diversity that it will likely challenge your worldview no matter how far through the book you get. It's important to point out from the start that this book is really dark. It deals with child abuse, slavery, rape, cannibalism, marginalisation, all of these major social issues, but they don't feel contrived or forced by the author. I believe that N.K. Jemisin has done a wonderful job tying in these issues throughout the entire world building and the story itself, so that they feel like a fantastic social commentary that's really interesting. The way that Origins and their magic system is tied into the world lore and the world itself is such a strong point of this book. N.K. Jemisin has created a magic system with very real limitations that just add to the storyline, and when that's tied into the world building and the catastrophes of the world itself, you just see it go from strength to strength. I honestly think the best way that I can describe this book in one word is different. There is a diverse range of people of colour, sexual preferences, plot lines, plot devices, the prose, the world building, the way it's all written it's just different. I mean, just in the main character base itself, there is a gay character, a trans character, and a bi character. So if you're looking for something different, if you're sick of reading the same epic fantasy novels, then this is a major reason why you might want to pick these books up. Another major positive about this book is the way that the world building itself creates tension. Throughout this entire story, there is, I found, to be a sense of tension that's directly tied into the fact that these apocalyptic events can occur at any point, and it's down to your character, your main characters, and the characters around them to stop those from happening. And so there's always this underlying tension of them trying to stop these catastrophes that could ruin the entire world and change to a new season. I liked the exploration of social themes in this book. There are things like oppression, independence, forced breeding, slavery, cannibalism, things that I've touched on earlier that are written from an incredible worldview author perspective. I think N.K. Jemisin clearly has a way of thinking that will challenge and did challenge my own worldviews, as well as will challenge yours throughout this book, and I would say throughout the rest of the series. But on that note, let's also just jump into a few things that I didn't like so much about these books. This book opens with a prologue that is at best probably I would describe as confusing, and at worst convoluted, and some of you will honestly consider putting the book down at that point. There is a section in the prologue itself that you get this entire info dump in the prologue, and then at the end of it, it says that it's basically not important information and tells you to forget it. And at that point of the prologue, I was just sitting there going, why? Like, why did you just make me sit through this confusing, there's all this confusing terminology and characters and world building that's just dumped straight on you on the prologue, and then to be told that it's not important was enough to just make you sit back and think, wow. And If you told me that you started reading this book and you put it down at that point, I wouldn't be surprised. It then goes into the first couple of chapters where this book does not ease you into anything. It jumps straight into these character views that are hard to get through. I found the whole start of this book really difficult. I think if you can get through the first 30% of this book, fantastic, but that first 30 to 40% of the book is honestly a struggle. The author gives you nothing. She just slaps you in the face with terminology, characters, and things that don't seem to tie in together at all. I saw a review where someone said it's like a puzzle, that you get these outside pieces, and as the story goes, you put these pieces together. And I think that's an incredible way to do it. I think it's an incredible way to talk about this story itself. And if you can get through that outside section of the puzzle and get towards the end where you're putting pieces in, it is quite enjoyable. And it gets easier to read as you go through. Two of the character views are written normally, although they are in present tense. And one of them is written in second person. And if there are any budding authors out there watching this, please don't. At the start of this book, about 20% of the way in, I honestly considered putting this book down and probably not picking it back up. And if it wasn't for the overwhelming majority of really positive reviews, including all the awards this book has won, I probably would have. Am I glad that I read the whole way through? Yes, but I wouldn't blame you if you put it down. This book has some seriously explicit language. It also has some really explicit sex scenes. So if these are things that you are wary of in your reading material, then this book may not be the best book for you. I think it fits into the overall story and the way that the author holds no punches throughout the story. But certainly there's a couple of times that I was like, whoa, okay. Something that I've seen some reviews talk about, but not heaps, is how much this book is a very character-driven book. If you're a reader who needs a plotline, a strong plotline, or even a medium strong plotline, I would say that this book probably isn't going to be very enjoyable. It's very much character-driven. There are some plot lines, but they feel shallow from fairly start to finish. There are some things that will catch your interest, but it's certainly not a plot-driven book. And on that note, I'm going to jump into some spoilers so that I can talk about that properly. So if you haven't read this book yet and you want to, I'll leave a timestamp in the description about where to skip to, or just skip to the last 30 seconds so you can see my star rating for this book. Spoiler time. One of the major plot points for this book is Essen's husband and daughter. She finds her son murdered very early on in the book, and she then believes that her husband is responsible for this, and she chases him throughout the world to try and get back her daughter. This plot seemed to really not go very far. We didn't get much from it. I understand how much of a motivation it is for Essen's character, but it feels a little bit contrived to get her from A to C. You know, you think she's going from A to B and she gets stuck somewhere halfway between. And whilst I understand this is an overarching plot line into book 2, I assume, it just didn't capture me the way that I would have hoped. Talking earlier about the prose and some of the issues that I found with the prose, and there is one line that sums this up really strongly for me, and it is, "Pyramids are the most stable architectural form, and this one is pyramids times 5, because why not?" I will happily say that I read this line 5, 6, 7 times as I was reading it, and it completely dragged me out of the story. I found myself just going over and over and over, and there's a couple of other sentences throughout the book that are very much like it, and you just sit there and go, excuse me? I don't understand. And there was just a few moments like that that really pulled me out of the story, and I'm definitely a reader who loves to be immersed in the story that's being told. And so that definitely made it hard for me to really get into this book. Another thing is the twist. Again, if you're still watching this is a spoiler. the twist that the three main characters, Demea, Cyanide and Essen, are the same person at different times in their lives. I picked that up really early. I don't know whether it's because I've just finished a Brandon Sanderson book and I know the way he writes and the foreshadowing he uses, and it seems to be quite similar here, or if it is just quite heavy-handed. There is multiple mentions of breaking hands, of things that have happened in the separate characters' lives that seem to link up. There's an untrue narrator where they don't recognize people till a certain point of the story and it's all coming together. But even still, I certainly very early on picked up that the three main characters were the same person. I think especially having three strong female characters with the same magic ability at different points and different locations in time, I just thought, why would these three not be around each other at the same time, or at least around the same characters at the same time? One of my favourite sentences in the entire book comes from the last line. It says, "Tell me, have you ever heard of something called a moon?" And up until that point of the story, we haven't even considered the moon in the world building, and it's something that made me stop, and obviously being the last line, it made me stop and think back through the entire book up until that point and just go, whoa, that's cool. And so that was certainly a really strong point. Speaking of strong points, Demea's storyline for me is my favourite out of the three. I didn't particularly like Cyanide as a character. I found her to be selfish and cruel and really jaded. And whilst I understand that that is Demea's personality after it's been put through the crucible of the world itself, I couldn't find myself to care for her. I found her really jarring to read, but again, a lot of people's reviews that I've read and seen up until this point said that her storyline and her characterization and her personality was their favourite of the lot. And so that's just a personal choice for me. So let's move on to my final thoughts. I'm actually surprised that this book by N.K. Jemisin doesn't have a more polarizing opinion. There are seemingly a world of people who love this book, and it certainly makes me feel like I'm in the minority to have not enjoyed it as much as the rest. I appreciate what N.K. Jemisin has done talking about social issues, and I think she's done it quite expertly in the way that she's tied it in throughout the world building and the lore. Again, world building, such a strong point of these books, and something that will certainly probably be the main reason why I pick up the second book in the series and the third. On that point, I'm definitely going to read the next book in the series. I think just for the social issues and the world building alone, I'm really interested. But the prose and the plot and some of the characterization I had issues with. Again, having the prologue just being an info dump and one that says something about it's not even important and then telling you to forget it. And there's just a few things in that section that made me sit back. And again, as I said, if you told me that you didn't finish the book at that point, you put it down, I wouldn't be surprised. So if you're looking for something different from your usual epic fantasy, normal magic systems, that whole thing, this book is a great one to pick up. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it as much as many other people, but that is great because it gives you a really well-rounded view of what different people think. So I'm going to give this book a 5 out of 10. And hopefully when I read the second book, I'll be able to immerse myself a little bit more strongly into the world and look back and enjoy this book more than I did. So thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.